Well, welcome to this episode of Did She Really Say That? And India is going to shock you with some of the conversations we're about to have because she is absolutely amazing. So, India Harville, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Harville? Okay, whew, gonna butcher that one. Is the founder of Embrace Body, a disability justice consultant, somatics practitioner, massage body worker, and performance artists committed to helping people rediscover the wonders of their body. Now, this is going to be a fascinating conversation because we're not only going to talk business, but we're going to talk some things that you may not be aware of as a business owner around disabilities and things that we tend to forget. That I think is going to be a really important conversation that we have, right? So, India, for over 2 decades, has guided nonprofits, universities, and organizations through transformative education on accessibility, inclusiveness, encouraging deeper embodiment, awareness, and collective healing. There's so much inside of that, ladies, that when you're listening to this, I hope you're kind of saying, this is somebody who's moving mountains and changing lives, right? She's a public speaker, consultant. She works at the intersect of culture and embodiment, helping communities and institutions reimagine what it means to create a truly inclusive space. She pairs this with her work as a dancer, body worker, and a somatic educator, offering practices that support resilience, self-expression, and connection. How many of you are kind of like, India's in the world. Thank God for that, right? Loving it. Her approach integrates movement, mindfulness, and a therapeutic touch, inviting participants to experience both personal restoration and community transformation. And this is one of the things that really drew me to India as we were talking and we had our meet and greet, because there's just something beautiful about movement, accessibility through life, and we all do it a little differently. And I think that's really, and India will share her story around this, but I think it's just super important that you guys are aware of just who she is in the world because she is a force. And she's amazing. So she holds a BA in psychology from New College of Florida, an MA in integrative health studies from California Institute of say that word for me, integral studies.
Girl.
Yeah, stumbling through that one. So, India, I am so excited to have you here on our podcast in this episode. So, how did you get into this study of really looking at supporting around justice around disabilities, this kind of advocacy that you're doing?
My goodness. So I would say around 2011, I had been disabled as a young person. I didn't identify that way. That's not how my family kind of raised me. And so I kind of overlooked that part of my life. And around 2011, my conditions got a little bit worse.
Mhm.
And I started having migraines with paralysis on one side of my body. And I was like, whoa, what is going on? It was actually rather frightening. I thought it when you first have this kind of migraine, people often think they're having strokes or something. So it's lots of emergency room visits, lots of trying to figure out what was going on. But over time, I just couldn't move my right side. And
Mhm.
for me as a dancer, that was pretty devastating. I had to stay home for quite some time because I just couldn't really mobilize myself. And then I got a wheelchair and I was like, wow, I feel so free. Exactly. That was exactly how it felt. And I started doing some rehab and I was able to get back out into the world. And the first place I went, of course, was dance class, except for I had never noticed this before, but it was not very accessible. Like there were stairs that I couldn't get into the dance studios in my wheelchair, and there were just all of these obstacles. And then people who knew me, people who I danced with for years, and I was like, I'm back. I'm so excited. And they were like, oh no, you're wheelchair bound. That's so sad. And I was like, no, no, this is great. I wasn't here at all. This is so good. And they just could not hold that frame with me. So I was like, oh, this is a thing.
Hmm.
And from that point on, I was really committed to educating people to understand ableism and help make the world more accessible.
And I love that too, because you talk about you hold the frame of mind. You're like, no, I'm free. Like I can get out and do things. Before I was like, I was at home, I was immobilized, I couldn't do anything. Now I'm mobile. And I think even for myself, just, I just don't know how to ask questions. I don't know if it's offensive to ask a question. Like, so I think there's just this stigma of being like tentative or not wanting to offend somebody, to try to understand where they're coming from and what they want to experience in the environment that they're in, because I think it really is a conversation, and it's to get into your mindset. And I just love you're like, no, I'm here, like I can still move, I can still dance, like it's just going to look a little different, right?
Absolutely. And, disabled people are like anybody else. There's going to be a lot of variety around whether people want to talk about it or how they want to talk about it. And I do encourage people not to be afraid,
Mm.
but think about a question you might ask someone else, right? So if you're not going to go up to someone who's not in a wheelchair and say, "Hey, how was your last gynecology appointment?" Right? That's kind of
True.
awkward. It's a little personal. And so maybe the thing that has someone in a wheelchair isn't like the first conversation you have with them, right? Like build a little relationship, have a rapport, and then say, "Hey, are you open to me asking you a few questions about your disability?" And be willing to hear a no. If they say no, then let it go. And if they're open, then, you can learn a little bit that way.
You phrased that so much better than me, so thank you for that guideline, because I butchered that completely on this. But I think that's the thing. It's like when you get to have these conversations, you get to learn how to ask, how to bring things up. Because I just think I mean, the only thing I've ever been on is crutches. And that's even its own obstacle course in the world
Right.
of getting access to everything. So, all right. So you got into this business. What's it been like for you crafting this and being an advocate for this? Like, what have you learned? What do we still need to be at work on as a society?
Wow. Um, I think it's interesting how, you know, I have to be careful when I say this because sometimes people take it out of context,
Hmm.
but ableism as a system of oppression impacts everyone. And I
Okay.
think that's the part people forget. Now, I want to be real clear, it doesn't impact us all the same way or to the same degree. But understanding how it's impacting you, whether you identify as disabled or not, is really like a critical step that often gets skipped. And then kind of contextualizing how much it impacts you compared to other people would be the next step that gets missed often. So, really, I'm excited to see a change in the world where more people are like, oh, I might be neurodivergent or I might have ADHD. So, we're seeing a bit of an opening towards like more acceptance of these things and the ability to question whether you're impacted or not. But
Mm.
really, everyone living inside of society has unmet needs. And the way our workforce is set up, the way, even if you're running your own business, um, things aren't always designed in the most optimal way to support your body mind, and everyone can benefit from working on that optimization. So that I think is something as an important start. And then I guess the second big category is just like there are a lot of amazing disabled people in the world. And if they can't access your product, you're missing a whole community that you could be serving, and you're not getting the wisdom and the information that that community has. People often think of disabled people as like, oh, they don't know anything or they're not useful, but inside
That's
of
not it at all.
inside,
That's crazy that people still think that. Wow.
I it might sound shocking, but I run into it quite frequently.
Wow. Okay, so I want to dive into kind of your movement with disability. So you mentioned that you were in a wheelchair. Are you like, so are you still there? Are you that because you're talking about being a dancer? I find this fascinating because you're talking about the embodied movement. So talk to me about how you brought dancing back into those that have like a disability that they can access this. Share that story with me.
Oh my goodness. So I have studied many different types of dance that um mm, types of dance that are designed to make things more accessible for
Okay.
disabled folks. And so there's a lot of different tools and techniques that we can use to design something.
Okay.
And so depending on what disability you're working with. So for me, um, these days, I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, which means I can walk some, but I still use a wheelchair for long distance, always in public. I actually use a really cool device called a zine, and it brings me up to standing height, and I can walk with the support of the device, and it goes all the way down to seated. So, um, something that's really cool about doing accessible dance is that a lot of times there's a lot of focus on what you can't do,
Yeah.
but there's actually some things I can do that are really cool and different than what a standing dancer might be able to do. So really looking at like the breadth of what is possible and training towards what's going on with your particular body mind. And so, um, I took this training in danceability, and I've done a lot of extensive training in danceability. And what I love about the danceability method is that you can find a way to work with any kind of body and introduce movement and expression. And, sometimes movement when you're disabled is always about a therapeutic gain. That's not our focus. We're much more focused on self-expression and joy and being in community. So, um, I feel like there's probably more concrete.
Yeah, no, but that was so beautiful because I think you talk about like this way of just moving. Like I feel it over here, right? Like when you talk about what's possible for anybody with any disability, like can we look for more information on this? Like, is there, like you said, you've researched this, you've kind of started practicing this again, or you've been in this modality. So remind me again, because I did not write this in my notes, because I'm snowballing this right now. But it's so what is it that you've studied? It was
Oh, so many things. The
this,
one I was just talking about was
yeah.
danceability.
So dance ability.
Yeah, you can Google that and it'll come right up. Um, Dance Exchange has a really amazing accessible toolkit that I work with a lot. And then I could name 100 different things.
Okay, so let's talk to you as a businesswoman. So we're going to shift gears. So there's what you've created, and then there's a business behind this, right? So talk to me about how the creation of this business got formed. Like what have you learned around this journey of designing this business and the accessibility of it?
Well, I think it's been a wild ride, and there've
So,
been
wait, I'm
different.
going to stop you right here. So, were you in the corporate space at one point and became an entrepreneur, or have you always been an entrepreneur?
I was always in the nonprofit sector, so
Okay.
I wasn't always an entrepreneur, but I didn't really come from corporate. So,
Okay.
but I had been in the nonprofit world and an employee for many
Okay.
years, and that wasn't really working for me. Like disability wise, it wasn't accessible for me.
Mm,
And so I was struggling. In fact, I have seasonal related aspects to my condition. And so it would be sometimes I would be like, okay, I might make it through this job for half of the year or three-fourths of the year, and then I'm gonna probably get fired. And that did happen a few times. And that's a part of what made me realize that I needed to design my own schedule. Of
mm.
course, then I became an entrepreneur and started working all of the time. So, but
Funny how that goes, isn't it? You're like, I want more time freedom, and then you find yourself working twice as hard in this place.
yeah. But I had a couple of friends who were like, hey, you could do some public speaking, you could do some education on disability justice, combine it with the embodiment work that you do, and that would really be an amazing offering in the world and
Mm,
might help you make some money, even though like a 9 to 5 job isn't going to work for you. And so I started off really slowly. I started doing some of those things, crafted a talk, revised it, those types of things. And at first, my company was pretty small. I did that, and then I saw disabled clients for massage and somatics, and I taught some dance classes. And that was kind of the extent of the business for a lot of years.
okay.
Fast forward to the pandemic, and of course, everything went online. And I actually like committed to not going back to working at a nonprofit job. And the company just sort of expanded pretty quickly from there. And
How so?
because I think, well, remember in 2020, everyone had a lot of time
Yes.
and people weren't necessarily like going to work because of the pandemic. And
Right.
so organizations were like, we could do a lot of education right now. We can't do much else. And so the demand for learning about disability justice actually went
Ah,
up considerably, coupled with the fact that DEI, which is now a dirty word, um, b- but DEI at that time really had a resurgence, right? And
right.
so people were also saying like, hey, we're dealing with racism, but we also need to address ableism. And so I was called in a lot on for that as well. So that happened. And then the arts world also really turned to working with disabled dancers. And I got a lot more opportunities in that sector as well.
That is crazy when I think about how it seems like you were teaching like the classrooms and the speakings, and then the demand for disability justice and what it is and how do you bring it into the work culture. What were some of the challenges, some of the top challenges you saw companies struggle with, um, having consulted or worked with them? Like, what were some of the things they were bumping up against? I'm curious. And you can generalize. I don't need specifics on any one company, but
Well,
she's like, wait a minute.
so often, I don't think this will come as any shock, but maybe your HR level brings me in, your program manager brings me in, and there's not buy-in in the executive suite. And so that would happen over and over again. The staff would really see the value in this, and executive suite did not. And I would be in awkward positions because I need to speak to both groups.
Yeah.
And what I need to say to each group was slightly different and somewhat contradictory in some ways. So, for example, if I have an executive suite that's fighting me and is against this, the way in is for me to say, hey, this will improve your bottom line. That's
Mm.
not why I'm doing this. That's not even the orientation to
That's
the
what they
work.
want to hear.
But
Yes.
that's what they want to hear to have buy-in. And so if that's the way to come in, then I can get in and then we can do the actual work and people change and grow, right? But if the staff hears that, they're like, no, you're a sellout.
Because
And I'm like, I'm doing this for you to do this work, the real work that you want to do, because that's what I believe in. But they have to sign off on this. So I would say those were like my biggest challenges across every organization all of the time.
I could see that. So with the move to a lot of online training, were there anything in the disability range that really kind of, and I could probably point to this to myself even, so there are a lot of things that shifted, because captions didn't exist on video at the extent of they do now until like 2020. Like it then became a almost like mandatory if you're going to post a video, have captions. So share with me some of the things that kind of went into play or that we really an awareness of it came really to light, in transitioning a lot of jobs, a lot of people into the digital Zoom space.
I mean, there were some really sad things that happened and some really amazing things that happened.
Okay.
So, a lot of disabled people had been asking to work from home for decades and had been told it's not possible, it cannot be done. Um,
Hmm.
and then when it was like helpful for the bottom line, and a necessity for the work world, capitalism figured it out very quickly. And so
They did.
that felt hard, right? And then I'd say for some people, as people are starting to go back into the workplace, not being able to maintain the option to work from home has been
Mhm.
challenging. So that was one of the harder lessons. But then I would say some things we learned that were unexpected and useful. One, being online, like for people like me, where working from home is really helpful for my physical health, it was a game changer. I didn't know, like my whole life, I'm an ambivert and I read as an extrovert, but I'm really introverted secretly. And I didn't know that being at home all the time was going to be my jam. Like I was going out, I thought I loved going out until I couldn't. And then I was like, wow, working from home really works for me. And then you had people who were on the opposite camp, which was also useful information for
Mm.
some people, whether they had ADHD, whether they just do better with in-person contact. Some people hated working from home and really wanted to go back into the office. And so, like the birth of hybrids and I think we really learned how to do good hybrid
Yes.
Zoom work inside of the pandemic or towards the second half of the pandemic. And so that has been an incredible learning. And now there's so much more advancement in how to run good hybrid events because before we weren't really making
It
it
was
work.
one or the other.
Yeah, yeah. And it's still tough, but goodness, we learned so much about that.
So business is growing. So you were by yourself, originally solo entrepreneur, single entrepreneur. Then you have business growth. What did it look like to then have that influx, like hiring people?
Ooh, what a learning curve. So it had been like my spouse works in the business as well, and we were used to being like a mom and pop team. And before things expanded so much, we could handle everything ourselves. And we tried to keep that going well past its prime. And started to really get burned out. And then that can impact my health. So I had to be really careful. And even then, I was like, well, maybe we just slow down. Like hiring a team never seemed like the right plan. And looking back on it, I'm like, that was rather foolish. I waited probably too long
Mm.
to move into hiring. And I had a lot of fear, like, will I be able to pay these people? Like, it was just so much. And I think having been such a small company, I hadn't done any education on how to be a manager or what it takes. I was terrified about running payroll and understanding the taxes and, just all of those types of things. So, when I finally brought on people, I was like, wow, this is going to be great. And I was like, we're a family. And that was another learning. I like the culture of my team is very close knit, and that I want to keep. And we do look out for each other. But this is work, and we have some things we need to accomplish. And so I brought in some people on my team who were not the best fit. I didn't
Mm.
know how to, I mean, like every part of this is a learning curve, right? I didn't know how to interview well. My goodness, all the time I wasted with people who just didn't even show up for interviews.
Oof.
So learning how to make my screening process, learning, even to have a buffer and have someone else on the team do a first round interview so that the people who are coming to me are really strong candidates. Like every part of this process was a learning curve. And unfortunately, um, I brought in a whole team that actually wasn't able to execute, which,
Mm.
in the back of my mind, right? Maybe this was self-fulfilling prophecy. I was like, I can't delegate because no one's going to do it properly. And then I hired a team of people who would not do it properly. And I was like, see, delegating is trash. I'm going to start doing it all again. So then we tried to go back. But by that point, we were way too big. And I started finding quality hires.
Mm.
And really, okay, so I don't want to make it sound like I just like learned and grew. I
Don't
also
screw it up. Got it.
I'm really sick. So I hired some great people and they recommended other great people.
Yeah.
Then I had this great team, but we hadn't done a lot of team building or training or anything like that. And then I just got sick. And I got so sick I was like out for 6, 7 months.
Mm.
And I basically had to be like, figure it out and do what you can. And then I came back and I was like, God, y'all did so much better than I would have. Y'all are doing like, wow, all these things you took away from me, I was never meant to be doing in the first place. And now we're building systems around those things. And like, I have, as the executive director, I need to understand everything that's happening, at least to an extent. And I need
Yep.
to know where to go and how to do it if someone's out. But I don't ever want to take back those tasks. That,
Off my plate. Thank God there's somebody else's.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that points to something that we talk about as women is so many times we're afraid to let go because nobody can do it better than you, right? Like that
That's
is
still true.
yeah, yeah. And it's true for all of us because there's a capacity in our background and what we've learned that we bring to the table. And I think one of the interesting things I had somebody say to me, a mentor of mine way back when we were handing off, he was handing off his workshop, right? When you hand over a high-end, high-level mentorship workshop, there is definitely a fear that you're going to screw up the whole process, right? Are they going to get the same information? And I just remember him pulling me aside. He's like, it wasn't exactly how I would have presented, but if you delivered 80% of what I would deliver, 20% was your own. And that made it unique to me. As long as you can look at having somebody in that can do 80%, you open up the creativity for them to look at things differently than I think you can look at yourself.
Yeah. I mean, and that's where I feel like my team has excelled because they, you know, for example, like marketing, not my area of expertise, my marketer. Chef's kiss. And I'm not going to fight her about things because she's going to know better than me, right? Where it really shows up is in my subject matter expertise. How do I bring people on the team who are
Mm.
training in that or who have their own background in that? And that's where this feeling of, oh, you'll never quite do it like me. But there's some amazing medicine in the way you do it. You're going to speak to a different audience. And also, like, I think that I don't know, sometimes I get like I I decided not to attend something yesterday evening that I usually like lead. And in my absence, the feedback on the team was really, really strong.
Hmm.
And sometimes, it's good to check your ego. Like 100% of your content isn't the best content. Other people have good content too, and to let that shine. And so I was even reminded of that just last night.
I think that's part of being a business owner. As you do bring people on, you start to grow to your next level. Like, right? Like India's leveling up. And I think that's even for myself, like Katrina levels up. Every time I bring somebody in, I hand something up, I get to play at the next level. And I think that's something that we don't recognize when we're in the trenches as the employee of our business, right? We don't get to continue to grow and evolve what we're building. And I think that's kind of one of those areas where you look at it and you're like, ah, I get to play a different game now. So I love it. I mean, you've shared some great insight. What did it feel like to fire your first employee?
Uh,
Everyone always asks, because this is one of your biggest fear factors, ladies. I can hear it over here. It's like, I don't want to fire anybody. Like, come on, laughing
I
at me.
mean, because of that fear, I kept people longer than was good. And I mean, in reality, it wasn't good for us and it wasn't good for them either.
Mm,
Just really wasn't a good fit. And, I wanted to make sure that I was doing it right. I have a payroll company and I checked in with them to make sure I was like crossing all my T's and dotting all my I's and had a little paper trail and it made me realize that again, moving away from only thinking of this like a little family and really thinking of it like a business.
yeah,
And that helped me tremendously. And my first time firing someone, I was so nervous. I like you would think I was getting
yeah,
fired versus doing the firing. And like the person, it was a little bit of a mixed bag how they received the information. Um, and But I feel like hindsight, I think they understood why it happened, and we're actually still in communication. So it was harrowing, but we made it through. And then because I had hired the wrong team, there was a combination of quitting and firing. So I got to level up that skill, and now it's less daunting.
yes. I will say that when I had to fire somebody for the first time, I think I was like you. I was more nervous about. I thought I was firing myself at that point. By the
Yeah.
time I walked into the room, I'm like, so we're sitting down. I'm like, I'm getting fired. Like that's how worked up I was around that conversation. So I can fully relate to that piece. Um, any last words of wisdom that you would impart on the women that are listening as they're building businesses? Something that has really just kind of stuck with you. Like, what would that be?
Hmm. I think it would have helped me to hear that we're all bumbling through this. And I think when you're an entrepreneur, there's a sense that everyone else has it figured out and they know what they're doing. It's just that they're not like talking to you about it in the moment. Like we're all in this steep learning curve and learning these things. And so find other folks to talk to about it and normalize like conversations about these things that feel kind of hard because you can be real isolated as an entrepreneur and think you're going through it by yourself.
Yeah, that is actually one of the most profound things I discovered when I was working with a company and we were coaching clients that were making 7 and 8 figures. It was the same conversation I was having with somebody just getting started. Like, I was shocked because I was like, but you're making so money is not an evaluation of somebody's business savviness. I will tell you that right now. The
Right.
dollars in the bank account do not equate to business savviness. And I think this is one of the reasons why I see over time a lot of people make money and people lose money, right? Because the mind shift that you talk about is such a critical piece. It's going from an employee mindset to a business owner mindset, and you look at things a little differently. Can you take some of your experiences as an employee, what you liked, what you didn't like? Yes. But I think it's just part of that journey. And I love that you shared this journey with us because this was just brilliant. So we talk about kind of as a gift for our audience of women that you have something that's really going to help them talk about accessibility. So for women, because I know you guys are all at heart. So there are definitely challenges. There are things you can be looking at in your business. And I think the India's got like, I love this because it's like give you an awareness look. So let's talk a little bit about this um, accessibility workbook that you put together for them.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times when people like women who are coming from the heart, who really care about folks, realize that their business may not be accessible for disabled people. They feel sort of, again, it's very daunting. There's some shame that can come up. They feel like maybe they should know this already. And you really shouldn't. Like, this information is not easily accessible, it's not out there. And so
Mm.
I designed this workbook for folks who are just for the first time maybe or very early in their journey thinking about, oh, accessibility and how do I approach that? And so I have a love-hate relationship with checklist. I think sometimes they make us feel like we've accomplished the thing and accessibility is more complicated than that. But as a starting place, to have some kind of support and a system that walks you through and some checklists to help you think about which elements of accessibility you're not exploring yet can be really useful. And so I've put that together.
Is this accessibility like workbook for both physical and virtual space?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So accessibility happens across every aspect of your business. And so I'm trying to speak to a little bit across all of the different places from your website to your social media to like your back of office work to your client facing work, all of it. There's a place to think about accessibility.
Yeah, I think, and I'll just quickly drop this for those of you that do a lot of image marketing, right? Especially on websites. And I think India can talk to this too. There is an alt text section. Now, in the world of marketing, we're taught to SEO the crap out of this section for visibility, blah, 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 blah. But this alt text section is actually geared for the disability and being able to describe what the image is. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And so something that you can try, usually if you have your Mac or even there's like little apps you can turn on, you can turn on something called a screen reader, and it will read your screen to you. And just go through a website and have that screen reader read. So if the alt text is describing the image, you'll get a description of the image. Otherwise, you might get some SEO optimization or some garbly goop, and then you can understand that if you're blind or low vision, you're not going to experience that image or know what's there. And so if I'm coming to your website and I'm blind and I want to learn about your service and you're communicating a lot through your visuals, I'm not having that experience. And so really you're missing out on a market there. You're missing out on a community that your work could impact. And it's pretty simple just to learn to add that alt text. And then, more website accessibility from there, but that's a great first step.
Yeah, like those little things because we don't think about it. And there's so many nuances to now marketing, especially when you're looking at that inclusiveness and just making it accessible to more people. Because for a while there, it was very limited in who could access and what they were getting access to. So, India, I want to thank you so much for being on our podcast and just in this episode of Did She Really Say That? Because, yeah, yeah, she did. She says actually, India said, you need to brush up on being more, aware, and she's calling you out on it. If she's not going to call you out, I'll call you out on it. I'm going to even call myself out on it. So let's be honest. It's something that, as a business owner, I think we can all raise our level of awareness around. And just know that, like she said, business is a growth process. You're learning as you go. So, same thing for when you're bringing on information about accessibility for disabilities. She's an advocate. If you have questions, reach back out to her. She's going to be a fabulous resource for you. Keep her in your pockets. Save her information that's going to be down in the show notes. Follow her and just really, learn from her because I really love the voice and what you're bringing into the world. So, thank you for just being someone who's got a mission that's really beautiful and so impactful, and your ability to present it is just so, I want to say eloquent is the word that comes up when I look at you. So
Hmm.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So if you all enjoyed this episode of Did She Really Say That, give this a thumbs up, follow India, connect with her, download, get access, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.